All right, so today we are talking money. We're getting into the nitty-gritty of building wealth, but not just generally. We're trying to make this relevant for you, for where you are in your life right now.
That's right.
And to do that, we are using data from the Spanish National Statistics Institute.
INEA.
Yes, the IE. We'll be referring to it a lot today. It's fascinating stuff, and we're going to try to use that to give you a roadmap to financial freedom, no matter how old you are, whether you're just starting out or you've been at this a while.
You know, one of the things I think is so interesting is that you see a lot of financial advice out there, and so much of it is really just one size fits all. The thing about the INE data that I think is so powerful is that it gives us a snapshot of how Spaniards your age are actually doing when it comes to finances.
It's like a little reality check, right?
Yeah,
Just to see how we stack up.
exactly.
And for full transparency, just so you know, all this data was originally in Spanish, obviously.
Of course.
But we have translated it all, we've gone through it all, and we're going to be bringing you the highlights today. And one of the things that jumped out at us right away when we were going through this data was that, in general, Spaniards have a ton of their wealth tied up in real estate.
It's true. And, of course, owning a home is fantastic.
Of course.
It's a great goal. But I think this data really raises the question. Are we, by focusing so much on real estate, potentially missing out on other opportunities to grow our wealth? And specifically when we're talking about investing in things like stocks or bonds or any of these, financial assets, as they're often called.
Okay, so let's maybe take a pause there for a second, because I think financial assets sounds a little intimidating.
Sure. Yeah.
What are we really talking about when we say that?
It's true. It can be kind of a catch-all term, can it? Financial assets? I mean, basically what we're talking about is anything that you own that has monetary value beyond just physical stuff, right? So beyond your house, beyond your, possessions. So that would include things like stocks, bonds, mutual funds. You might have a retirement account maybe. It's essentially any money that is out there potentially working for you, potentially growing over time.
So not just the cash that I have in my pocket, but really more about investments that could potentially turn into something bigger. Right?
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so now that we've cleared that up, let's dive back into the data a little bit. I'm curious what this looks like for people in their 20s and 30s. Those who are just starting out. Maybe they're still paying off student loans, they've got their first jobs, maybe they're even thinking about buying a place. Where do they fit into all of this?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a crucial time, isn't it? It's that time where you're really setting the stage for your long-term financial well-being. But I think it can be easy to get discouraged when you look at your bank statements and you're not necessarily seeing huge numbers yet.
Yeah.
And I think this is where the magic of what we call compound interest comes in.
Okay, I've heard that term thrown around a lot,
Yeah.
compound interest. But I'm not going to lie, it kind of sounds like financial jargon to me.
Sure.
Can you explain it in a way that maybe even I could understand? And full disclosure, this is someone who once tried to pay their electricity bill with Monopoly dollar.
Laughs. Okay, so imagine this. You decide, okay, I'm going to be really responsible and start investing a little bit of money every month. So you start putting away, say, $150
Right.
a month,
Yeah,
right?
reasonable.
Reasonable. So you start in your mid-20s, and that money is earning a little bit of interest. But here's the cool part. The next month, when that interest comes in, you're now earning interest not just on that original investment you made, but also on the interest that you already earned. So it's like this snowball effect.
So you're saying my money is making more money on its own. I like that. That's a lot better than finding a random fiver in my jacket pocket.
Way better. And the cool thing is the INE data shows this so clearly because they have an example, that exact example actually, of someone who starts putting away 150 euros a month starting at age 25. And by the time they hit 65, so 40 years later, they've put in about 72,000 euros of their own money.
Okay.
But their total savings have ballooned to over €500,000. And that's all because of this compounding effect.
Wow. That's incredible. So even if you don't have a ton to invest right away, just starting, even with a small amount, can lead to really big gains in the long run.
Totally. And like they say, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today.
Exactly.
So, for those listeners who are maybe in their late 30s or 40s thinking, okay, maybe I missed the boat on that whole compound interest thing, it's not too late.
Yeah, you can still hop on board.
Exactly. You can totally still make it work for you. And this is often the time, late 30s, 40s, where people are starting to see some real career growth.
Yeah, you've got a little more wiggle room in the budget.
Exactly.
But then there's that whole lifestyle inflation thing.
Oh, yeah. That can really get you.
You get a raise and you're like, Perfect time for a new car.
Right. Or you upgrade your apartment or your vacation.
Oh, I've so been there.
So easy to do.
Like, I remember one time I got a bonus, and I think I immediately went online shopping for like a designer handbag that I absolutely did not need.
It's so
Which is
tempting.
tempting.
But the thing is, every time we're making a choice about how we're spending our money, it's also a choice about what our future is going to look like.
That's a good point.
And so the I&E data really emphasizes this idea of increasing your savings rate as your salary increases.
Okay.
So it's not just enough to be earning more. You have to also be putting more of that money aside.
That makes sense. But how much are we talking about here? What's a good savings rate to aim for?
Well, the source we looked at, they had a target of having 4 times your annual salary invested by the time you hit 45.
4 times.
4 times.
Okay. That feels a little ambitious.
No, it sounds like a lot, right? But when you actually break it down, it's totally doable.
Okay.
So even starting at age 30, if you're consistently investing 15% of your income, you're going to hit that target.
15%? Okay. That feels a little bit more manageable.
Right.
Like, I can work with that.
Exactly. And I think what's interesting is that even as people move into their 40s and 50s, the data from the INE shows that investment in financial assets, it stays surprisingly low here in Spain.
Really?
Yeah.
I would think the closer you get to retirement, the more you'd be thinking about that and less about just real estate.
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like a lot of people still really view property as the ultimate investment,
Yeah.
especially here in Spain. But what this data is showing us is how important diversification really is.
So not putting all your eggs in one basket, even if it's a nice brick and mortar basket.
Exactly. And the source that we looked at, they compared 2 different scenarios.
Okay.
One where someone is saving 15% of their income,
Mm-hmm.
and another where they bump that up to 30%.
Okay.
And in both cases, they're putting a portion of that into financial assets, things like stocks and bonds.
Okay.
And the difference in how much they ended up with in retirement was really significant, even when they factored in things like rising housing prices.
Wow. So it really highlights how even those small choices, like
Mm.
deciding to put an extra 15% aside, can make a world of difference down the line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about building wealth while you're working, but what about when you're actually retired? That's when you get to actually enjoy the fruits of your labor, right?
That's the dream, isn't it?
Yeah,
To just kind of kick back and relax.
exactly.
But one thing that surprised me in the data from the INE was that even with really careful planning, a lot of people find that their wealth, it peaks and then actually starts to decline during retirement.
Really? Why is that? I always picture those golden years as being, smooth sailing.
You would think so, right? But retirement often means switching from a regular income to a fixed income.
Okay,
And a lot of times that fixed income is going to be lower than what you're used to.
that makes sense.
And especially if a lot of your wealth is tied up in your home, it can be difficult to actually access that money if you need it.
So it's like having this treasure chest, but not being able to open it.
Exactly.
So how do you avoid ending up in that situation?
Well, this is where the idea of what's called the 4% rule comes in.
4% rule. Okay, that sounds very official.
It sounds very official, doesn't it? The INE data pointed to this as a potential strategy to make your money last longer in retirement.
Okay, so what is the 4% rule? Break it down for me.
Okay, so it's a guideline, I should say. It's not, set in stone.
Sure.
But essentially, it suggests that if you have a well-invested, diversified portfolio,
Mm-hmm.
you could potentially withdraw about 4% of that portfolio each year without actually eating into your principal investment.
Hold on. Principal investment, what does that mean?
Sorry, financial jargon again.
That's okay.
It just means your original investment, the money that you put in at the beginning.
Gotcha.
So the idea is with the right investments, you're living off of the growth, the interest, the dividends, that 4%, but the original money that you put in is still there continuing to grow.
Oh, so my money is working even harder for me in retirement.
Exactly. It's like having your money make you money while you sleep.
I like the sound of that.
Right.
Can you give me an example of how that would actually look in real life?
Sure. So the INE data had an example of someone who's entering retirement. They have a portfolio of, let's say, 540,000 level. And of course, that's adjusted for inflation.
Sure.
So if they were to follow that 4% rule, they could potentially take out about $21,600 every year,
Okay.
which is about $1,800 a month. And that's without even touching that initial investment.
So their investments are continuing to generate income even as they're enjoying retirement. Wow. Okay, this is definitely making me rethink my own retirement plan a little bit.
I know, it's a game changer, right?
It is, because we talk a lot about investing in stocks and bonds and things like that. But what about the classic idea of just owning your home outright in retirement? That's always been a big one for
Yeah,
me.
it's a common goal for sure.
Right. That's the dream.
It's a big dream, especially here in Spain.
Yes.
But what's interesting is that the INE data actually encourages us to consider an alternative scenario.
An alternative.
Yeah.
Okay, now you got me really intrigued. What are we talking about here?
So instead of putting everything you have into owning, that big property outright, what if you downsized a little bit?
Okay.
Went with something smaller, maybe a little bit more manageable, and then took that extra money and invested it, diversified.
So downsize and diversify. I don't know, that seems a little counterintuitive, especially here in Spain. We're very much about owning our own homes.
It's a big shift in mindset, for sure.
Mm.
But just imagine for a second. You sell your big place, you buy something smaller outright, and then you take all those funds that would have been tied up in that big house and you put it into investments. You put some into stocks, some into bonds, maybe even a rental property or two.
No, instead of having it all in one place, you're spreading it out, creating more options for yourself.
Exactly. And potentially generating income from different sources. You've got dividends from your stocks, interest from bonds, maybe even some rental income. It creates this more dynamic financial picture.
Okay, so it's less about just having that one big asset, the house, and more about creating multiple streams of income, even in retirement.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what's so powerful about that approach is that it gives you options and flexibility. You're not as tied to a single source of, well, anything, really.
It's like you're flipping the script on the whole traditional retirement plan. Instead of potentially ending up house rich but cash poor, you've got this more diversified portfolio working for you.
Exactly. And it all comes back to what are your goals, right? What's
Mm.
important to you? And then aligning your financial choices with those goals. What works for one person might not work for another, and that's okay.
This has been such a fascinating conversation. I feel like we really dug into some data that you don't hear every day, and we uncovered some really interesting insights into how people here in Spain are approaching their finances.
Absolutely. And I think the takeaway for our listeners is that no matter where they are on their financial journey, there's always something they can do to improve their situation, whether you're just starting out or you're getting ready to retire.
So as we wrap things up here, what are some of the key things you hope our listeners will walk away with today?
Well, I think we saw how powerful compound interest can be. Even small amounts invested consistently can really grow over time. We also talked about the importance of diversification, not putting all your eggs in one basket, especially when it comes to something as big as real estate.
And let's not forget about that lifestyle inflation. As tempting as it is to spend more as we earn more, being mindful of our spending habits can really set us up for greater financial freedom down the line.
Absolutely. It's all about making choices today that benefit our future selves.
It's all connected, isn't it? I know I've learned a lot today, and I'm sure our listeners have too. Any final words of wisdom before we sign off?
Just remember, it's never too early or too late to take control of your finances. Every step you take towards making informed financial decisions, it matters.
Love it. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into building wealth at every age. For our listeners who want to explore these topics further, be sure to check out the show notes where we'll be sharing some helpful resources. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep those financial goals in sight.